It is your boy, Sweet Tea. And this is the Sweet Tea MMA Talks YouTube channel. Okay? And the meat and potatoes of my content is primarily going to be movie reviews and the rating on said movies and how I feel about the movies in general and what lessons I feel like is trying to put out there to the wider audience of whoever's consuming it, pretty much. That's about it. As you can see from the title of my YouTube channel, it is, I am also an MMA fighter, and am I still looking for a fight constantly? Yes, always. But I also like to do other things in my downtime, and this is one of those. I really like to watch movies and talk with people about how those movies make me feel and how I feel like other people interpret said movies. Outside of that, we're gonna go ahead and get started. The first movie I'm doing is called The Boy and the Heron. It's actually a Studio Ghibli movie. They really haven't done a whole lot that I know of recently with movies. At least, as I said, this is as I know of, and this one was the first one I've watched in a very, very long time as far as it being new content. And it was a really good movie. I really liked this movie. It's about this boy named Mahito, and he just goes on this really fantastical journey, trying to find, the love that he's looking for, in interpersonal relationships. That's the short end of it. But, here's some fun facts about the movie. It's written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki. This guy pretty much set the standard for a lot of Studio Ghibli films. He made Howl's Moving Castle, My Neighbor Totoro, and Spirited Away. And then he also, he was in retirement before he decided to come out of retirement and make this movie. He's done this a few times. Excuse me. Whew, that one was a rough one. But yeah, he's done this a few times, but he always sets the standard. And in general, Studio Ghibli sets the standard as far as anime movies as a whole. Just their entire cast and lineup of movies, all of them are iconic in their own ways. That's the best way I can put it. Right? There was also a book named the same thing, The Boy and the Heron, but it is not the same story that takes place in the movie. It's actually written by Genzaburo Yoshino, and it was made in 1937. As I said, this movie is its own unique story, and the book does show up at some point in the movie, because the boy Mahito is looking through books, and it's one of the books. So they do everything pretty much comes full circle in this movie. There aren't a lot of missing pieces that you have questions about for the most part. As far as the way I watched it at a movie theater in my town, and because I live in North Carolina. I'm not gonna put out any specifics, but yeah, I live in North Carolina, and where I'm at, they didn't really have a English subbed version, so I watched the English dubbed version, which they had their own all-star cast, which really made the movie pop because these were some really good actors that they chose to do it. These are the main ones. We have Christian Bale. He played Shoichi, which is Mahito's father. And then he was also in Howl's Moving Castle. And then we all obviously know him as Batman. And we also he's played and some other stuff. Oh, American Psycho, that one's a really good one by him as well. And then we have Florence Pugh. She played Kitiko, one of the ladies of the house, and she was also in Puss in Boots: Last Wish. And then we have Gemma Chan. She played Natsuko, and that is Mahito's stepmother. And she was also in Raya and the Last Dragon, and she also played as Quintessa in Transformers: The Last Night, which was pretty cool, I think. And then we have Willem Dafoe, absolute powerhouse, and he played the Noble Pelican, and he was one of the fishes in the tank in Finding Nemo and Finding Dory. And obviously we know him from his role in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and then also in Spider-Man No Way Home in the MCU. And then we have Karen Fukuhara, who played Lady Hime, and she also plays as Haru in Pokemon Concierge, which is a very, very new animated series. It's got stop motion animation, which is always really cool to see. And she played as a character in one of the Star Wars Visions episodes. And she also is in The Boys. She's the Asian girl that the team acquires when just somewhere along the line in The Boys, and she ends up being a main character. She's a pretty good character, and she also is in the Callisto Protocol. She does a really good job in that one as well. And then we have Mark Hamill as the Grand Uncle, and he is most notably known for being the Joker in Batman the Animated Series, which was phenomenal. And then we've got Robert Pattinson, and he played the Grey Heron, and this is his first voice acting role. At least from the research that I've done, this is his first voice acting role, and he did absolutely awesome. And then we have, and obviously you know him from Twilight, and then he also played the Batman. And then last but not least, we have Dave Bautista, and he played the Parakeet King. We obviously we know him as Drax from the MCU, and then from people who watch WWE, obviously he was in the WWE, and then he also was in the Gears of War series. He was in Gears of War 5. You could actually play him in online multiplayer. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Okay, so the movie starts off with Mahito being woken up in the middle of the night because there's alarms going on because there's a fire at the local hospital. Okay, and he lives in Tokyo, mind you. Okay, so this is keep in mind this movie also takes place during World War II Japan and partially post World War II Japan at the very, very end. But you're going to see a lot of people trying to make do with what they have. That I feel like that's a lot of what this movie is about. And another movie by Studio Ghibli that also focuses on World War II Japan is The Grave of Fireflies. That one particularly focused on the air raids and the impacts of the air raids on the local population. And what that does to families, that specific movie. But this one's a little different. It takes the flip side versus if you were going to say Grave of Fireflies is about the poorer side of people, this is about the people who have a little bit more money. Now, as I said, we start off with a hospital fire that takes place 2 years prior. So I'm going to say that this happens in 1943-44, or in between 1942 and 1944, this happens. And his mother's at that hospital, and she ends up dying and set fire. Now, I'm gonna stop here and say this. The animation was just absolutely top-notch. You're not going to find any animation that's better than this as far as hand-drawn animation. When I found out that it was completely hand-drawn, I was just like, yeah, this, like, as I said, Studio Ghibli is the, like, king, and I'll stand by this, is the king of animated movie animation as far as it goes with anime movies. I've never seen another company do it the way that they do it. As far as hand-drawn stuff, there are some other movies that do some other things, and they're all special in their own right, but as far as hand-drawn goes, Studio Ghibli takes the cake, and most people who watch anime are gonna agree with that. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it on that one. But as I said, she dies in set fire, and the animation was just like you could really, the color was so bright, it almost felt like you could. To me, it felt like I was borderline feeling the heat of the fire, and I don't know if it was because not only because of the colors and the sound being mixed together, but like everything was very like you could feel everything that Mahito was feeling. And after that, 2 years pass, and mind you, he ended up watching the hospital burn down, and his father Shoichi goes to the hospital to try to put it out, but like there was nothing that they could do. So yeah, there's that. So 2 years pass, and we come to see that his dad decides to move them to the countryside, and he ends up marrying somebody else because he's got a young son, and I'm assuming that his thought process was, my son needs a mother, and that's completely fair. That's completely fair. And the mother, the stepmom, ends up being his wife's sister. Now, I was like, that's really, really weird. Like that's really interesting. And then on top of that, she's pregnant. And so all of this, Mahito is finding out as soon as he hops off the train from Tokyo to the countryside where they're at. And he, you can tell that this rocked him. He was like, holy crap. Like, my life is really moving extremely fast. Right? And so, now keep in mind, his father brought this bag with him, and it was really heavy. And you wonder, what's in this bag? And, she's talking to Mahi, and then, he gives it to them, and he's like, I got to go to the factory, because he owns a factory in the town. And, you don't figure out what he's doing in said factory until about midway through the movie, and I'll say that when it comes up. Now, they end up going up to the house where they're at, or the homestead. I'm gonna just call it the homestead. They end up going to the homestead where everything takes place, and on the homestead, there's this essentially they have to walk up all these rock steps to get to the main portion of the homestead once they get there. And she is struggling carrying this big bag. It is a gigantic bag. Imagine carrying a chair, but it weighs 5 times I'm just get 10 or 15 times as much as this chair weighs. And she's just ugh, bang, ugh, bang, ugh. Yeah, so she's struggling coming up these stairs with this bag, and Mahito, he's a little too young to have the strength necessary to carry it, I'm assuming, because if I were him, I would have carried it, but I don't really know, they don't really provide context on that. So yeah, they get up there, and then they meet the ladies of the house, right? And they're all really worried about what they're like. what did he get? What, like, they say hi, and they're like, oh, it's nice to meet you, and they're like, oh, she's like the spitting image of your mother, isn't she? And like, this trips him out. Like, this is a lot for this boy to take in, and he's only seen his aunt once, and he don't even remember it. So like, they're very estranged. They don't, and this is their first time meeting. So this is a whole lot for this kid, right? And as soon as they get there, they say hi for like 10 seconds, and then they're like, what did he bring? What did he bring? Like, they literally do not care about like his feelings at all. It's just like, what did Shoichi, Mahito's father, bring? And his stepmother's name is Natsuko. Now, if we're continuing, not even if, we're continuing from there. And, you know, this is World War II Japan, so at the time there was the island hopping campaign, so a lot of supply routes and stuff were cut off for Japanese exports and stuff, so like, they had to make do with what was on the island. And I understand why they're so worried about it, because these are premium goods that they haven't gotten in a long time, but like, this boy is just struggling right now, and they're not really doing a lot to help him. And like, they do their best, but like, it's wartime, so like, just different times like like call for different things, and this is one of those things. Like, you got to be just a little extra tough. Like, you know, feelings aren't really the forefront. Now, she ends up walking him to his room or whatever, and while he's on the way there, there's a bird that flies by, and she's like, and Natsuko's like, oh, that's the local gray heron of the area. He must have taken a liking to you, because he typically doesn't fly this close to the house. And he's like, okay. So, you know, she's walking around trying to, you know, show him the place. And then he ends up wandering off towards the tower that the gray heron went into. Now, this gray heron, the way it went into the tower, it was really weird. It like stuck its head in like reverse, and it like it was weird. Essentially, it did not look normal for a bird to do something like that. Like, that was real suspicious. And another thing that I really like about this movie is that they show that the animals are animals. Like, there's poop on the windowsill of the tower and everything, and like, you can tell that the heron really sits there a lot, because all of its crap is right there. Now, this tower is abandoned, right? They don't, and they don't, no one should be going there, and it just, it's an old tower, and it's surrounded by a lake, and that's about it, that we know of it at this point in time. And and then when he goes up there, one of the ladies of the house, I think the one that actually does come to get him is Kiriko, and she's like, this tower is dangerous, you shouldn't be here, you know, just leave this tower as is. And he was like, but the heron's up there. And she was like, it don't really matter, just stay away from the tower. He's like, well, okay. And he leaves it be for the day. All right, and then he goes back, and he ends up going up to his room, like going to the main home where him and his family would be living. And he ends up, and Natsuko shows him his room, and he just sits on the bed and kind of goes immediately to sleep, like practically passes out, because he's just been through a lot in that day. Like, that's just a whole lot to take in for a kid, you know? Moving to a new place, finding out that your aunt is your stepmom, and then also that she's going to be having it, and also that your future cousin is also your brother, and yeah, that's just that's a lot for a kid to take in, you know. So when he goes to sleep, he has a nightmare about the fire at the hospital 2 years before. So you can tell that he has not moved on from it. In the 2 years, he has not moved on from it. and he's having a very hard time accepting that his mother is gone. And in the dream, the heron comes to him, and he's like, "Your mother is alive." And he's like, "No, she's not. You better get away from me, man." Cause like he's like did the funeral and everything, you know, like he was at the funeral. He saw the hospital get burned down, and that was just a lot. Like that's just a whole lot. I know I keep saying it, but like this kid has been through the ringer. World War II, probably he can't be the only one that had this happen to, but like for him, it was just a whole lot, and he had a hard time coping with it. Now, after the heron leaves in the dream and he wakes up, it's almost like the dream actually was like real, because when he wakes up, he finds poop on his windowsill, and he's like, "Come on, man!" Like, I would be super pissed too if I woke up and I found bird crap on my windowsill. I would be super pissed. You wouldn't be. You know what? If I was him, I probably would have done the same thing that he did. We're gonna get there. Now, he like tries to go close it, and he's like freaking out about it, and the one of the ladies of the house is like, "What? Just slow down. Look, bro, like I'll help you. Just relax." But he's like, it's almost like he's borderline having an anxiety attack about this heron, which is understandable because animals should not be talking like that, and that's and your brain does its best to comprehend what it's going through, and if it can't comprehend it, like that's enough to break someone's mind. Okay. Now, later, the heron comes back, and you see the heron on top of the house. You see when it opens its beak, it's got like, it's almost like there's a separate face inside of the beak of like inside of the mouth of the heron is like it opens up, and you see like a separate face. There's like a nose and like a row of teeth, and I was like, okay, this movie's starting to get kind of strange now. I wasn't really sure where the movie would go, because I didn't read up anything on the movie at all before watching it. So like this was complete surprise. I was like, okay, this is about to take a really strange turn. And it does indeed, because the heron comes to him when he's at the lake, when he's just sitting at the lake at some point, and a swarm of toads, and the heron summons a swarm of toads to take him to the tower, against his will, and he gets him to stay at the water initially because he's like, "Your mother is in the tower, and she's alive." And he's like, "No, she's not." And you know, he's arguing because he was at his mother's funeral and stuff. So, when that whole exchange happens, the heron summons these toads, like a big supernatural swarm of toads, to take him to the tower against his will. And Natsuko, I guess she had some sort of premonition or whatever. She takes a whistling arrow and fires it at the heron, and it hits the heron in the neck, and like puts him in the water. It doesn't kill him; it just puts him in the water. And the swarm of toads disappears, and they're like, "Oh, thank God you're okay," to Natsuko and stuff. And they're like, "Look, the tower is very, very special. Your grand uncle, he went missing after reading like a crap ton of books and stuff in the tower, and like he was literally never seen again. So no one is allowed in there. And we closed it off because it was actually dangerous for people to even go in there anyway. A lot of people died trying to make the tower too, because it was a meteorite that struck the ground where it was, and then forestry ended up, you know, being built back up, because that's what nature does. It adapts. And the forestry took the just, you know, made it, you know, a more natural landmass over there. And the they built the tower around the meteorite, essentially. And with that being said, the story continues, and they tell him about his uncle, and he's like, that's a little strange. And, after that, Natsuko is like, I'm just not feeling well, I'm gonna go to bed. Now, she's super pregnant at this point. She's super pregnant. Like, in the beginning of the movie, she makes him touch her belly. She asks him to touch her belly, and he feels his future cousin / brother kick. And he's like, oh, like, this is really happening right now. And because she's super pregnant, it's just, like, really hard. You don't have a lot of energy when you're pregnant. At least what I've seen from women that are, like, that far along, doing something like that would require a lot of energy from them. So they would typically end up going into, like, bed rest or something. So she went into bed rest, and she's like, can you come see me to talk? And he's, like, avoiding it. And he's just, like, just doing things. And then finally he ends up going to see her, and they have a little conversation, and he's just like, yeah, thank you. And he's just like, yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. That was a really scary situation. And because he sees her bow and arrow in the corner, he gets the inspiration to make his own bow and arrow. And he uses one of the feathers from the heron that the heron left in his windowsill after that dream. And it ends up being a very, very special feather. And this feather makes it to where the arrow never misses its target. Okay, it's like Guy Bolg from Fate Zero. Like, a whole lot of force is present with it. It's going to make it to its target. You just got to hope the arrow itself doesn't get destroyed first in the process. So he ends up finding, later, he ends up finding a book left by his mother, Hisako, and I believe this is the actual Boy and the Heron book by Genzaburo Yoshino. And he reads most of it, and it's at this point where he sees, we find out first what his father does in the town, which is he builds airplane cockpit covers, okay? So the things that cover the glass that covers the pilot when they're flying, that's what he manufactures in his factory, and that's the factory he owns. So he is extremely important, not only in that area, but the country of Japan itself. Okay, so later on, right, because they bring all these parts to the house, and like a few seconds later, they see, Mahito sees his stepmother, Hisako, disappear into the woods heading towards the tower. And then they end up saying that she's missing, and he's like, I know where she's at. She's probably in the tower. And it's at this point that Kiriko, we really get an insight. She's like, look, we don't need to go into the tower. Just leave it be. Like, I'm sure she'll find her way out. And he's like, no, we have to go to the tower. Like, I'm going here. And then they see the heron, and it leads, and he says, yes, she's in the tower, and so is your mother. And he's like, my mother is dead, and I know you're lying. And Kiriko is hearing all of this, and she's not freaking out. She's kind of freaking out, but she's just like, I don't, like, look, bro, leave it. I'm telling you to leave it. And he's like, no, I'm gonna go see what this man is talking about. So they end up going into the tower in the side entrance that they find in the same place where she entered the woods. And when they get inside, the heron takes him to the center of the tower, essentially. And the tower, and in there's a chair, and his stepmother is on the chair. Or at least what appears to be his stepmother is on the chair, when in reality, it's just some sort of watery apparition / copy of her that's not even real. And the heron's like, it would have succeeded, like, it would have lasted a bit longer if you hadn't touched it. And he was like, why would you? And Mahito at this point, he's mad, so he draws it there. He's like, why would you do this? And like freaking out, which is understandable. Who wants to see their stepmom turn into a pool of liquid? No one. So, when this happens, the Heron's like, I'm gonna, like, the Heron essentially tells him, I'm gonna kill you. Like, I'm gonna get my lick. And he's like, oh really? I bet. So he draws the arrow and he fires it. And because it doesn't miss or anything, it follows him all, as the Heron is trying to avoid, it follows him all around the room. Now it's a special feather, and it's the Heron's weakness. It's feather number 7. Special flight feather number 7. And it hits him right in the beak. And it turns him into a tiny little Birdman thing. And it's at this point that the Wizard of the Tower is like, enough, Heron. I command you to guide him on his journey. And then the Heron's like, really, bro? Come on. This is some BS. Like, I ain't trying to do all this. And he's like, alright then, cool. Like, he just kind of accepts it. And then it's at this point, like, and mind you, Kiriko is watching this entire exchange. She's not really saying much. And then at this point, she, what's it called? It's at this point that after this, you don't really see her anymore, but they sink into the floor. And this is the old Kiriko that I'm talking about. You don't really see the old Kiriko anymore throughout the movie. And they sink into the floor and they go into this, like, weird world that has a bunch of water and like sparse islands throughout and everything. And when Mahito lands or finds land, essentially, as he lands into the water and then swims to shore, there's like this obelisk kind of like grave thing there, and it's sealed with a gate, and there are these pelicans overhead. These pelicans swarm this man and start attacking him and forcing him through the gate. And what the obelisk and gate do is they seal the dead there, and they keep them from waking and rising and coming back to wreak havoc on the world, in that world. So it's almost like this world is like a plane between life and death itself. Now, he ends up getting saved by a younger Kiriko, and she's a fisherwoman. And they end, after he gets saved by her, they end up catching this big fish, and then they take it back to her like forest boat thing, and they cut it up and they serve it. They cut it up and sell it to these waras. They're like these bubble-like spirit/souls waiting to be born into the world above. Okay, and that's where Mahito is from, the world above. And some time passes, and he ends up passing out after like cutting open this fish and everything, because it's just a lot going on for him right now. And the pelicans later that night, like, because they haven't died or anything, like they didn't get killed off. So the pelicans come back later that night when the Wara are about to be born into the world above, and they start mass predation on them, and they start eating up these Waras, and they get saved by a pyrokinetic named Lady Hime. And it's at this time that Mahito is like really pissed, and he's like, you don't need to like do all that, because not only are you hurting the pelicans, you're hurting the Wara too. And like, I don't think she even hears him, or I just don't think she cares, because she's on a separate mission anyway. And it's at this point that Mahito sees a dying pelican. All right, and this is what we call the noble pelican. This is Willem Dafoe's character. Okay, and it's on the forest raft or whatever, and it's begging him to kill it. It's begging Mahito to kill him because he's in so much pain from being burned all over by Lady Hime. And Mahito's unsure of showing it mercy. And the pelican then says that this is how their life has to be because they were brought to a world with no food. Like, they have to make do with what they're given. They had to adapt to the situation. They had no choice. And after that it dies, which it like opens his eyes as well as the audience's eyes on, you know, what like what's, you know, like a little bit more to this world. Like this world has some darkness to it as well, and it's not all peaches and cream. So we continue, and the Birdman ends up finding his way to the forest raft, and Kiriko gets Mahito and him to like hash it out. And it's at this point that there are these dolls under the table, and she tells him not to knock them over, and that and she gives him one in the form of the older Kiriko, and she's like, hold on to this because it will protect you in your journey. And he's like, okay. So they end up so Mahito and the Heron end up going to this like island, and the Heron's like, hey, look man, I still have this arrow in my beak. I need you to take it out and restore it because I can't fly, and I need to be able to fly, or we won't be traveling nearly as fast or as agilely without it. And Mahito's like, I guess, fine, yeah, cool. And he ends up restoring it, like fixing the hole in his beak and giving and restoring the Heron's flight. Now they run into these huge man-eating parakeets on this island that they're at, and they have to get separated because the Heron distracts the watchers at the top of this home that they're at, and he leads them away from the house. Little does he know that there's more parakeets on the inside, a whole lot more parakeets on the inside. And that like, and like when I say they're huge, when I say these parakeets are gigantic, they are like my height taller, and I'm 5'10", so like if I'm standing at the wall, they're like boom and higher, okay? And I'm getting lost because there's a lot of writing. I use my handy dandy notebook to keep up with what I got to say and do, okay? Old heads will know what that is. Alright, so what's it called? You know, move forward. Mahito goes into the house, and there are more parakeets in the house, and they have utensils ready, and they're like, we're going. They make it pretty clear. They're like, we were waiting on you. We knew you were there. We were waiting. So come on in. Come on. We don't waste no time. Come on. We ain't got all day. We hungry. You're the food. Come on. This like, I'm ready. You know, they over here give them the SpongeBob. I'm ready to eat, and they have no issues eating people at all. So, you know, you continue, and as they're like, they tell them, yeah, we were expecting you, but we're still going to eat you. And they lead them to this table where they were going to like chop them up and put them in some stew. And Lady Hime ends up bursting out of the fire, and she's like, boom, blinded by the light. right? And she bursts on the scene with a bunch of fire and stuff, and she saves him. And they're like, it's time to go. And he's like, okay, I'll go. I don't want no, he said, I want no issues. I want no issues. So he ends up going with her. And she takes him to her house. Like, they get transported through the fire, which is the exact, and keep in mind, this animation is the exact same as the animation from the fire at the beginning of the movie. So you're like, obviously, this person and that fire are connected, right? And leads them to the house, and she ends up making them food before they have to go to the in-world counterpart of their of the tower in the world above. And he's like, "There's a tower here too," and she's like, "Yes, because there are." He's like, this essentially, she explains how this is a world that transcends space and time itself, and that the meteor was a very special meteor, and it does special things to spirits and people. So, you know, she makes him like this peanut butter, like this jam and honey, like toast thing, and he's like, wow, my mom used to make it exactly like this. And she was like, well, your mom must have been pretty awesome then. And he was like, yeah, she was. I'm not saying nothing. I'm saying a lot of people know where I'm going with this. A lot of people know where I'm going with this. Just stick with me. Just stick with me. I promise it'll all make sense. So, you know, time continues, and they end up sneaking in some like 007 type thing, like da 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 da. You know, like they're actually doing some super spy type stuff to get to the tower, which is in the Parakeet Kingdom. Okay, and the Parakeet Kingdom is ruled by the Parakeet King, who is Dave Bautista's character. Now, they end up finding the Hall of Doors or whatever. And the Hall of Doors, it leads to different times. Just different moments in time. And she's like, this door is to my time and this door is to yours. And they open the door, right? Because they haven't gotten caught by the parakeets yet or anything like that. They open the door and she's like, oh, like, yeah, if you let go of the door handle, like, you'll go back to your world for sure. And he's like, but how can I get back? She's like, there's no guarantee you can get back. And he's like, well, I'll close this door. Like, well, I'm not letting it go because I need to get my stepmother. Oh, man, I'm burping so much. People that know me know that I have the most burps out of anybody. And I get yelled at a lot for it. It just is what it is. Yeah, she's like, there's no way you're getting back. Well, he's like, I'm not letting it go. And his father, Shoichi, Christian Bale, ends up seeing them. He's like, going there. He's like, oh my God, I see my son. But he's with this strange girl, but I still see my son. I'm gonna go over there. And he like takes off to them, and he's carrying this like sword or whatever. And I don't know. It don't make a lot of sense as to why he would have a sword at this point in time. Like I get it, you know, his son and his wife and this and one of the ladies of the house are missing, but it does not explain the sword at all. So like it just doesn't make any sense, especially if you're just searching for people, in my opinion. So he ends up, like, by the time he gets to Shoichi and them, they end up closing the door, and his dad's like, but they were just here, like, why can I not just they've been gone for like a day and a half, so he's just like freaking out. He's like, oh my God, I just cannot take this. And like he's just like losing it, like in front of this tower. Like his mind cannot comprehend. He feels like he's like having a whole freaking, what's it called, hallucination of just like things that are happening. So they end up, and so when they go back into the tower, they do make it to Natsuko's delivery room. On the way there, they can't touch the walls or anything because the tower doesn't like them be like, the tower knows that they're not supposed to be there, and they don't, and the tower doesn't like it. So the tower is making it difficult for them, especially if they're going to touch the wall and stuff. And when they get to Natsuko's delivery room, he goes in there and he tries to get her to come. He's like, please leave with me, please. And she's like, no, you leave and I hate you and you just need to go. You're not even supposed to be here. And she's like giving it to him, right? And it's at this point where you start to see that maybe she didn't necessarily want this for herself, and she also had to make do with what she got given, with what she got given at the time as well, just like he did. And you're like, dang, like she's experiencing this and not really knowing what to do either. So like she's still doing her best too. And I think at this point he also sees that, because he's like, Mom, please come with me, because this is the first time he acknowledges her as his mother. She doesn't force it, which is really good. A lot of people, when they marry a person that has kids, sometimes the husband slash wife or spouse, whatever you want to call it, it just happens a lot more than it should. They try to force the kid to see them as their parent when that's not necessarily their job. You can be an ear to listen to, but you can't force them to see you one way when that's not the case. It'll end up hurting said person in the end when they get rejected. And it just is what it is. That's just the way of life. Sometimes but she's doing it the right way, and she's respecting his boundaries on the situation, and that's a lot, and that means a lot, and he sees that in what she's doing and saying to him. So he chooses to really accept her as his mother. And the entire time there is this magic paper that the tower is using to stop Mahito from making contact with her, and there's paper swarming around them and just hitting him in the face and stuff. Do you ever see the Vacation movie where that family it came out in 2014, 2015. His family takes this vacation, and the brother puts the bag over the other brother's head, and he's like, oh, he can't breathe until that's literally what's happening, but with the paper in this movie. It just struggling. So Natsuko's like, look, I'm gonna burn all this. Not Natsuko. Lady Himi's like, I'm gonna burn all this paper. So she burns it all, boom, without burning him, which is pretty cool. That means she has a lot of control over her pyrokinetic abilities. Shows how much she's honed them, if they're not hurting the people that they don't that she doesn't want them to hurt. So after that, right after she burns all the paper, the tower reacts, and it zaps them all, and it makes them all pass out, because he almost gets her to come with him, and she does, and Natsuko almost does come, all right, but the tower knocks them all out, and while he's unconscious, he ends up meeting his great-granduncle, who happens to be the wizard of the tower. Okay, so the ruler of the tower is his great-granduncle, and he's stacking these blocks on the table. He's really preoccupied with it. And he then tells Mahito that he would like him to rule the world, take over the world he built and rebuild it in a better fashion than he did. And he says it has to be Mahito, because it has to be one of his descendants, and it has to be someone who is willing to do it. And Mahito's like, okay, but, and you know, Mahito's a special individual, so he can tell. He's like, hey, all these blocks have malice attached to it. All these blocks have malice attached to it. How am I supposed to build a world better than this one if all the blocks have malice? And he then wakes up from the dream. And when he wakes up, he's chained up to like this wall, and it's covered. And what's it called? And you know, he's about to be eaten by the parakeets because they got caught in the parakeet kingdom. Like as soon as they passed out, they were like, food and royalty, food, royalty, food. They're like the exact opposite of the people, the sharks from Finding Nemo. They're like, fish are friends, not food. Nah, they said, men are food, not friends. They do not care. Okay, as long as they eating, they okay. And it also speaks to show, like, because parakeets don't eat that in real life, obviously, you know, like, and they're also not that large in real life. And it's at this point where you meet the Parakeet King, because Mahito gets broken out on some 007 type stuff. Alright, I had to stop doing this, so I'm trying to think. So, like, the Birdman is the one who breaks him out, and he's hiding in this pot, right? So he's like hiding in the pot, and then he's like, am I seen? Am I seen? Am I seen? And then he knocks out this parakeet, and then he breaks out Mahito. Now, what's it called? They begin to climb the tower, and they're following the Parakeet King because the Parakeet King is using Lady Hime as a bargaining chip, as a political bargaining chip, to get what he wants, which is to rule the tower himself. So, like, it's almost like, all right, you know, I know who the ruler of the tower chose, but I also don't think that person's fit. That's where this Parakeet King is in his thinking, because he's lived there his entire life. He knows this world better than a person that just got there a day and a half ago. So he's following, and like, keep in mind, she's in this like glass box, and she's like passed out. Okay. And as he's making it up to the tower and whatnot, he knows Mahito is following him. So he makes it as hard as possible for Mahito to follow. Like, talk about knocking stuff down the stairs, dun, dun, dun. And then, like, once they got to the top, he sliced he like destroyed the wooden portion of the stairs that Mahito was on, and they fell all the way down to the bottom. How he survived, I don't know. It's the spirit world. We're just gonna go with that. So eventually Mahito does make it to the top, right? And when Mahito makes it to the top, at that time, the Parakeet King just finished having this conversation with the Wizard of the Tower. He's like, look, man, this was a taboo, and he didn't really respect the fact that it was a taboo. Like, this is an issue. We need to handle this now. How does he not know these rules, essentially? And the Grunkle, granduncle, whatever you want to say, I'm going to just call him Grunkle. Okay, so the Grunkle is like, look, he's learning, and I really want him to take over in my place. Like, give him time to make the decision on his own so that it can be completely natural, and I'm not forcing it. Because he saw what happened when he forced it. It created malice in all of these things that were there, at least that were there against their will, and the things that were there against their will are the what's it called? Are like the parakeets and the pelicans specifically. Those were things that were brought there against their will, and they didn't have control over it, so they're just really making the best of what they can in that situation. So the Parakeet King like stalks and watches as Mahito comes up to the thing, and he gets there because the Birdman flies him to the top. And he gets there, and then he traverses this thing, and the Bird King, the Parakeet King, is doing his own 007 type stuff. And like he's sitting there sneaking behind objects, and I honestly, for the life of me, this is the part that frustrates me the most about the movie. As much as Mahito was looking around, I don't understand how he didn't notice the Parakeet King. Or maybe he did and he just didn't care, which is certainly possible, especially if you're on a mission just to get to a place. Like, you're not gonna care who's following you as long as you get in there and it's a real emergency, which it was. It was, and it's very valid. So, so when he gets up there, his grunkle, the Wizard of the Tower, presents him with blocks free of malice. Okay, and he had to search like to the edges of the universe to find these things because they were hard to find. And Mahito picks one up and he's like, "Yeah, these are free of malice, but also I am not free of malice." And this is symbolized in the scar that he gave himself when he hit himself in the head with the rock. And he's like, because of this, I cannot rule this world correctly in the way that you would like. And I need to accept those that love me. And in reference to his new stepmother and, you know, the ladies of the house and stuff, because they were respecting his boundaries, but that doesn't mean that he was making it any easier for them. So the Parakeet King is watching this exchange and decides to assemble the blocks himself. He's like, "Man, if that's all you need to do to take over this, if that's all you need to do to take over this world is assemble the blocks in the way you see fit and just make sure it stands, then I'm gonna do it real fast." So he just puts them together real crappily, like no care at all, which is like Mahito understood. Like, now I'm gonna pause right here. Mahito understood that in order to rule properly, right, or at least to be a proper leader, you have to lead with care. You can't just be arrogant with your power because you think it's right. This is a very mature little boy. Yeah, he sees that he can't just that you can't just put it together any which way. But the Parakeet King did not matter because it's almost like the Parakeet King was acting borderline like a spoiled brat. Like, because I'm the Parakeet King, I can just do whatever the hell I want. No, it don't work like that, buddy boy. Absolutely not. Okay, so because he did it that way, they fall apart, and he gets real angry, and he's like, "This is pointless. Why is it even in the form of blocks anyway?" And And keep in mind, Mahito's holding one block still, right? And he's holding this block still, and the Parakeet King decides to slice up the blocks that he had on the table, and this triggers the end of the world. Not the end, but like the destruction of that world. Okay, and the world begins to collapse, and there's flooding and earthquakes everywhere. Okay, and then the Parakeet King himself flees because he's like, "Oh, I didn't even realize that this would happen," because he didn't get explained the rules, because he wasn't supposed to lead in the first place. And the granduncle decides to since his life was tied to the power of the tower, right? He had to he perished with the tower, essentially. Now, in the midst of flooding, in the midst of the flooding taking place in their world, right? Mahito, Hime, and the Birdman, Heron, escape. Okay, now he flies them through these massive like tsunami waves or whatever, and what's it called? And they escape, and they get to the Hall of Doors, and then they get reunited with young Kiriko and Natsuko. Because she ends up waking up because the power of the tower is diminished. That's the only reason she went there, was because of the power of the tower, to bring Mahito there, because the uncle was really, really wanting Mahito to lead them. But, you know, he declined, which was very smart, because with great power does come great responsibility. Not trying to steal that from Spider-Man, but that's real. That's absolutely real. And I will stick to it. So it's at this point where Mahito learns that Hime, right? That lady Hime is his mother's younger self. And with that being said, the Heron was not lying to Mahito when he said that his mother was alive in the tower, because she was, just not the same one that he remembered. And he tries to warn her. He warns her of her impending fate, and she's like, which is the hospital fire, and she's like, "Bro, I like fire anyway. I'm okay with this. Like, it's all right. Like, fire is fire to me. And you know, whatever happens, happens. I'm just glad that I have an awesome son like you in the future, and that I'm glad that my sister is about to have her kid. You need to go home and worry about you. Everything is okay." So finally, he comes to terms with the fact that his mother is gone, and he can accept that she's no longer with them, and move on. You know, because it does take time to move on. You can't. There is no time limit on grief. It's like every person has to come to terms with grief on their own, and figure out, you know how they want to proceed, essentially. And and then when we continue from here, right? She goes back to her world with young Kiriko, and then Mahito, his mother Natsuko, and the Birdman return to their time, with a mass exodus of animals behind them, the parakeets and the pelicans, okay? And they all revert to their non-anthropomorphic forms, okay? Which are like they're just their basic forms that they're in the real world, okay? And mind you, these birds are pooping everywhere. They're taking craps all over everybody. Everybody getting the poop in their hair, on their clothes, everything, right? And I'm just like, dang. Like, can you just oh man, the amount of frustration that I would have with these birds in this movie if I were Mahito is unimaginable. I'm glad it was not me experiencing this, because I would not have been as nearly as graceful as he was. Okay, so when they get back, the Birdman Heron notices that the stone that Mahito was holding, he had it in his pocket, and he's like, "Do you remember what happened?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I recommend you forget it." Which is completely fair, because if somebody came to me talking about they went to a whole fantastical world where there were parakeets that were bigger than me out there, and just essentially just out, like, and that his great granduncle has been alive for over 200 years, I wouldn't know what to do with that either. I'd be like, yeah, you know what, I'm good. Like, just don't even. You might need some help, buddy. You might need it. You know what? Like, sit down, talk to me. Like, I just wouldn't believe it. So like, it's understandable for the Heron to be like, you should forget this experience. And the little doll that young Kiriko gave him of old Kiriko ended up turning into old Kiriko. And it like literally, it was in his pocket, so it just would like literally, I like that. like the gist of what was like what happened. He just literally started moving in his pocket, and it just, and out popped old Kiriko. No. Right, the dad. Right as soon as she popped out, the dad. You see the dad again, and he's coming up. He's running with this sword that was absolutely useless for the entire movie. The only one who used the sword in the entire movie was the Parakeet King, and he was boss with it. He was strong with his sword strokes. Okay, he had longsword style. Anyway, oh man. Anyway, so. The dad's freaking out because the 3 people that have been missing, he finally found them. And, you know, he's just happy to have his family back. He's like, oh my God. Oh, thank you. Thank you. He's like, thank God. Thank you. My life is not a lie right now. He's just, like, you can tell that the past 2 days have been the most, like, difficult things to ever happen to him in his entire life. Which it would be difficult for me too. If I lost my family, for if my family mysteriously disappeared, if my wife mysteriously disappeared while she was pregnant with my child, I would be like, well, not necessarily. Well, let's correct it with our child. If she disappeared while she was pregnant with our child, I would be freaking out too. Like that wouldn't be something that's easy to handle. And the birds are still crapping all over everyone. And then the Parakeet King ends up landing on Mahito's shoulder. And then, he embraces, and then the dad embraces them, not caring about any of the bird crap. He's just happy to see his family, which, any man would be happy to see his family at that point. And, 2 years pass, and Mahito and his family move back to Tokyo. With Shoichi, and so his family now consists of Shoichi, his father, Natsuko, his mother, him, and then his new brother that's just over or under 2 years old. And with that being said, that's the end of the movie. So, in my opinion, right, with the not only because of the artwork, but because of your voice acting cast, as far as English, because I've seen some movies that don't have a good English voice acting cast, and the animation is just really horrible, or like the story just doesn't make a lot of sense, or you name it, like like they're just a plethora of issues. But this one really, really, really did its job. Anything is possible with a really good cast, okay? It can be the worst movie ever, but if you've got a really good cast, people will pay attention to it. And like this one was also, the substance of the movie was really great, and the emotions it brought out of people were top tier emotions. I'd say this movie is like a continuing on my remarks on it. It's like this movie is a testament on the struggles of blended families, and how they're having to cope with how they're having to learn how to live with one another, and respecting the boundaries that are being put in place by people, because without healthy boundaries, kids can't even hope to expect to thrive without trauma. Every childhood is going to have at least a little bit of trauma in it from somewhere, somehow. You never want that to happen to you. You never want your kids to have traumatic experiences. But this movie is a testament on, how blended families can really come together to end up being not only just a blended family, but an actual family, where there's no difference. And it just, they're just there and they're happy to be with one another. And it also speaks on, accepting that, humans struggle with one another, and struggle with accepting other humans' emotions about certain subjects and stuff. Like his mother, his stepmother, is a saint because she really does her best to try and respect him as much as she can, and without that, I don't think his transition would have been as easy. Like, I'm not saying his transition was easy, because, like, he got bullied in school, which I got bullied in school too, but other stuff was happening at home. And when he got bullied in school, what he did was he decided to do self-harm. What I did, I didn't necessarily do self-harm, but I did a lot of interesting things. When you're going through a lot of trauma, your brain chemistry is altered, and because of your altered brain chemistry, you do things you normally wouldn't do. Like, I punched out the glass in a clock when I was like in 7th or 8th. I was in 7th grade. Yeah, I was in 7th grade, and then when I was a sophomore, because I was angry about something really, I can't even remember what I was angry with this girl about. I was just angry about something real stupid, and I punched the wall and broke my hand. And I still wrestled that wrestling match, though. And I think I either won by 1 point or lost by 1 point. I can't remember if I won or lost that wrestling match, but I wrestled with it, and it was that was hard. That was a hard lesson to do. And then you realize, dang, this ain't even worth it. And even in the movie, you start to see, because his dad ends up paying off, because another detail is his dad ends up trying to pay off the school, hey, handle this, or I'll handle it, kind of thing, which is like nepotism and and whatnot. But it's like he tries to even downplay it because he didn't get the reaction that he was looking for. And you could tell he really regretted it, as did I when I did those things, because I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do. I had to sit out of wrestling for 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. That was a lot. And my sibling, one of my siblings, was just not very nice to me during that time. Granted, yeah, I was stupid and breaking my hand, but I still didn't deserve to be talked to like that. And yeah, that just a lot of things happen to people, and it pays to just be gentle with one another. When you're being gentle with your fellow man, right, and they choose to open up to you, don't take advantage of that, and don't use that against them later. I experienced a lot of that, not only at home, but out in the real world. So it was just tough, so from me speaking on it, just be gentle, just be gentle with your fellow man. Be willing to accept, that humans are out here humaning, and you are human too. So it may not be done maliciously, right? But actions hurt, and they have consequences. So just be decent to your fellow man. That's all I have. That's really all I have to say on that. But in all, right, I'd say that this movie is an easy 8.5 to 9 out of 10. Really, really solid movie. One of the better Studio Ghibli movies, in my opinion. Certainly in the top 5. For sure. Certainly in the top 5. And I will certainly stick by, I stick by what I say on that. And I'm gonna close it out here pretty soon. If anybody has any suggestions on the next movie I should do, I will happily take those. And anybody, you can put them in the comments, or you can What else? You can send them to me personally if you know me personally. Or if you have any questions for me in general that you would like me to answer in another video, I will happily answer those as well in separate videos. I just, I want everybody out there, obviously, to succeed. So go out there, be happy, love one another, treat one another decently. Much love to anyone and everyone out there. Peace out.